Maybe the biggest part of my story is just my family.
I moved to Vero Beach for flight school.
Playing football, especially, I would get invited to a lot of parties.
During this time, he's like full weight on this knife trying to plunge it in me.
Like knowing the Lord brings me so much peace and joy and just confidence.
So I held this dude as he took his last breath, and it triggered this question and said, what is this life for?
Yo, 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 what's up, party people? Welcome to another episode of Thrive and Dive, thriving in life as we dive into deeper conversations. The purpose of this show is to help you thrive, and today is another episode of Things I Learned as a Teacher. We've been going through the book Teaching to Change Lives by Dr. Howard Hendricks, 7 Proven Ways to Make Your Teaching Come Alive. And we're tackling the last of his 7 lessons, and that is the Law of Readiness. And in his book, the Law of Readiness states the following: the teaching learning process will be most effective when both student and teacher are adequately prepared. This is so true. I don't know if you've ever been a student of a teacher and you felt that he was just shooting from the hip and you could tell that he was not prepared whatsoever. Personally, I have been accused of this, and the person accusing me was correct. I remember my first couple of years teaching high school Bible classes. I had a student that was not afraid to call me out on my bluff. And he shared one time, you are not prepared, are you? In front of the whole class. And I painfully had to concede and say, yes, I am not prepared. I am just winging it, building the airplane as I flew it. And that is not the best approach to teaching. Even if you are good at, improv and coming up with things right on the spot, I can be a little good at this, but not dangerous enough to do it as a lifelong lesson. But even if you are good at doing stuff like that, you need to come prepared. And not only do you need to come prepared, but you need to allow your students to be able to come prepared. I don't know if you've ever been a part of a lesson or even staff meetings where you had no idea what we're going to talk about. And as you go through that lesson or through that staff meeting, you feel like you're on a roller coaster, just going from turn after turn, ups and downs, not really knowing where the world were going because you weren't prepared as you came in. And some of that might be our fault if we don't do our due diligence and come prepared with a prepared mind. If we haven't done our homework that we were assigned by our teacher or our leader, then yeah, that's on us because we came in unprepared. But also, if you're the teacher or the leader, it might be your fault that your students or your constituents or those under you are not prepared. It's because you didn't prepare them. And typically that happens because you yourself are not prepared to begin with. And to be able to see both the student and the teacher prepared, it takes a lot of preparation and legwork from the teacher on the front end. You've got to be so prepared that you know where you're going with the class, not only in today's class, but also in next week's class or tomorrow's class. So you have a well-rounded direction of where you're going, which takes a lot of work, a lot of lesson planning. And then you got to be so prepared that you know where the students need to go in order for them to be prepared. So it takes a lot of legwork in the beginning. And if you're not up to doing that, then chances are your teaching is not going to be as successful as it could be. So make sure you are ready. So that is the law of readiness. And let's just go through some things that Dr. Howard Hendricks talks about in his book. He talks about the importance of successful assignments. And when I say assignments, I don't want you to think like homework or busy work or just things to get students to do something so they're not just sitting around. I'm talking about meaningful assignments that creates critical thinking in your students or your subordinates, allows them to actually be involved in the learning process. Because I found, after being a teacher and after even being a young adults director at a church, that those who are listening don't typically prefer the lecture style of teaching where you're doing all the communicating and they're just listening and not really engaging in anything. So assignments allows for audience engagement. It allows them to be hands-on in the learning process. I know recently, as a young adults director, I had an older couple come in and share a spiritual gifts workshop class with our young adults. And I remember several of my students commenting that that's one of their favorite nights of young adults. And it was because it was so hands-on. The teachers were so great at, incorporating the students in the class experience, having them take turns reading, asking good questions, engaging in great dialogue within the classroom. And that really stood out to me that so many students were engaged by that, because I honestly came into that class thinking this might be the most boring lesson at our young adults group because we're going to be doing a workshop. We're going to be doing spiritual gifts for 2 hours straight. But little to my surprise, that was actually the students' favorite lesson because it was so engaging. And I learned that, man, I need to stop just lecturing to my young adults and allow them to be involved in the process. So assignments are good. And Dr. Howard talks a lot about the importance of assignments. I'm not going to get into everything he says. I encourage you to pick up this book, Teaching to Change Lives, to read all the intricacies. But really, the main thing he's trying to get at is don't be afraid of assignments. And don't have this presupposition that nobody's going to do the assignment on their own time. Nobody likes doing homework. And that's a false pretense. Because if you lob up the assignment and show them the importance of it, it's going to be a slam dunk most likely because you did the work to persuade your students that, man, if you do this assignment outside of class, you're going to be even more prepared for the next time we meet and you're going to get more out of it. You really got to sell it. If you're just giving busy work, like I'll read these 3 chapters from the book of Isaiah and then we'll maybe get to it next week, then of course they're not going to do it. But if you construct your material in such a way that, man, if you really want to, squeeze every ounce of information out of this Bible study and get the most application possible, you need to do this. They're going to honestly have a little bit of FOMO if they don't do it. And not FOMO in the sense of fear of missing out of, the experience, but more fear of missing out concerning the content itself. They're going to be like, man, I don't want to be left out of the next conversation in class because I didn't do my homework, right? I know that's how I felt when it came to homework or assignments. I was like, I want to be able to be fully engaged, and I feel like I'm just kind of like coming to a sequel of a movie without watching the movie that came first, right? Have you ever watched a movie, a trilogy, and you watched the third one, but you never watched the first and second one? It's kind of a painful experience trying to figure out what exactly is going on here. I do not know the plot. And so students don't want that FOMO of content. So really persuade your students with assignments that are engaging and that it would be so important for them to do it in order to get the maximum experience. Dr. Howard Hendricks talks about the idea of fighting silence within your teaching experience. So I have found personally as a teacher that the best type of learning is discussion-based learning. And this really came from Dr. Howard Hendricks' book. Maximum involvement means maximum education. Maximum readiness means most impactful teaching. All of this is discussion-based learning kind of connects all these different laws that Dr. Howard Hendricks is sharing. So, but the hard part about discussion-based learning is that is the fear of awkward silence, right? That you pose a question and then all you get are crickets. And you're just sitting there awkwardly. And the silence is deafening. And it makes you feel so uncomfortable. And it makes you want to come in and save the day and say something. But Dr. Howard talks about how you need to sit in that silence. Just sit in it. It may be awkward for a little bit, but eventually a brave soul will speak up and break the ice. And then it's just like a dam breaking. The waters of discussion will flow through the whole room. But you got to be willing to walk in that tension of silence and not close an opportunity too soon, right? In fear of it being too awkward, we close silent moments too soon. And if we just held out for a little longer, a great conversation could have ensued. So embrace the silence. Don't settle for silence. Don't settle for you lecturing the whole time. And this requires, for me, posing good questions, right? And re-clarifying questions if people don't understand it. And really starting with small or softball questions in the beginning. If you give some huge theological question that has so many implications, I don't blame your class for being silent. But if you're able to ask questions that are, attainable, that people can actually contribute to, this allows them. And Dr. Howard Hendricks talks about in his book that unfortunately, a lot of people have insecurities concerning the information they're learning in their class, right? Like, I'm not the expert on Bible. I'm not the expert on science. You are. You're the teacher, so let's hear from you. And they have this insecurity of speaking up for fear of being wrong or saying something stupid or dumb or whatever. But you as a teacher need to cultivate an environment in your classroom to where all questions are welcomed. It's like kind of caring for a plant, right? Your class is your plant that you're watering, that you're taking care of, that you're being gentle with, so that it can cultivate into a flourishing tree. And this requires, and Dr. Howard Hendricks talks about it in his book, that you celebrate answers, that you celebrate questions, right? When someone asks a question and they're kind of like trembling a little bit, you got to respond with positive energy. This just helps their psyche so much. And Dr. Howard Hendricks talks about this. Even if what they asked wasn't actually that profound or that stimulating, still celebrate the fact that they are brave enough to ask their question. Because once everyone in the classroom realizes that this is a safe environment, they're going to be more willing to ask those questions that will generate that great conversation that will allow for maximum learning, right? But that's on you to cultivate that classroom experience. If you don't respond when someone asks a question, if you don't congratulate them for asking the question, and if worse, you scold them for asking a question or saying something dumb, then you're really short-circuiting the learning environment, and discussion-based learning will not be achieved. So fight the silence, ask great questions in order to stimulate that conversation. Then Dr. Howard Hendricks talks about fielding tough questions. And this is when questions are asked that you as a teacher have no idea what the answer is. And he shares, instead of trying to make up something, go ahead and admit that you don't know. Celebrate the question and be like, man, that was such a very good question. Such a very good question. But I don't know the answer to it. Let's look into it together. So that allows them to feel like they asked a great question without feeling like put down that you didn't know the answer. And it shows the human side to you, right? You're not a genius. You might know this area of study pretty well, but we all have our limitations. So it makes you feel more human and more relatable. So don't be afraid of tough questions. And if someone asks a question that seems more accusatory, please don't get defensive. That's the best way to shut down good conversation. I've seen this happen, specifically in staff meetings that I've been a part of, where a question was asked and the person who was asked gets very defensive by it and had a very not so great response to it, which shut down any further conversation. Nobody wants to get scolded, right? So if you're creating that environment as a leader, as a teacher, then don't be shocked if your room is silent when you ask a question. And if you do mess up from time to time, we all mess up. No one's perfect, and you do get defensive. Make sure you own that. Make sure you apologize for it and share with your constituents, your subordinates, that this was wrong and I apologize, and I hope this doesn't cause you to lose trust in me to ask questions in the future. You have to own it. You have to help them heal from that situation, because if you don't, it's very detrimental to you as a leader and to you as a teacher. And then lastly, Dr. Howard Hendricks talks about making sure there's no one person's dominating the discussion. I had a student that was very interested in the material I taught in hermeneutics and apologetics, and I was super grateful for him, but I had to make sure that he wasn't dominating all of the discussion, because really you want everybody discussing, even those who are quiet, even those who are very disinterested in the material. If you can get them on board to conversate and to start discussion, man, the opportunities are limitless. So make sure you're not allowing one person to control the conversation. And then lastly, sorry, I said the last point was lastly, but this is actually the last point. Dr. Hendricks talks about developing note takers in your students and encouraging them to take notes. And taking notes is a skill that takes years to develop sometimes, right? To outline what is being said in a way that you can remember it when you look back to your notes. I don't know if you've ever looked back to your notes of a good message and you're like, I have no idea what the person was saying. I have no idea what I was writing down. Because most likely you're not the best note taker. So as a teacher and as a leader, help encourage your students to take good notes. Show them what they should be writing down and be very detailed with it at the beginning, and then start to wean off a little bit to where they know how to write down the important stuff for themselves. Maybe this means giving out handouts. Maybe this means giving fill-in-the-blank notes. Maybe this means saying, hey, you should write this down, word for word or thought for thought, whatever it may be. Because you can't just assume everybody is, one, interested in taking notes, and then two, if they are interested in taking notes, do they know how to take good notes? So taking notes really just encourages them to stay engaged. Really, that's one of the most preliminary ways you can create involvement in your audience is to take notes. They're engaging in the material. I know that's why I take notes, so I can stay engaged, even if the person doesn't ask me to take notes. But if you're in a position you feel comfortable asking people to take notes, encourage it. Don't mandate it. No, don't mandate it, but encourage it, and you'll see how it just brightens up the classroom experience because everyone's engaged. People aren't just giving you blank stares, and it just creates that law of readiness most effectively. So there you have it, folks. That was the 7th law from Dr. Howard Hendricks' book. And I want to state it one more time for you guys once I find it here in the book. I seem to have lost my place. Is this, the law of readiness. The teaching learning process will be most effective when both student and teacher are adequately prepared. As a teacher, be prepared. As a teacher, help your students to be prepared. That is the lesson for today. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give us a like on YouTube if you're watching it. If you're watching it on Spotify and you enjoyed this show, be sure to give us a 5-star rating. And if you're on YouTube and you're not subscribed, be sure to just subscribe. I'm so thankful that you took the time to listen to this video. I hope this was helpful to you, because this is Thrive and Dive, thriving in life as we dive into deeper conversations. Have a great rest of your day.